London-listed Angle plc is a medical diagnostics company. It's recently reported full-year results. Andrew Newland is the chief executive, and he joins us now. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to be able to talk to you. I'm eager to know, first of all, about the product. You just reported full-year results, but the results really centred around the progress that you've made. Tell us about the progress and what you're doing.
Yeah, so our product is the Parsortix cancer diagnostic system, which enables a liquid biopsy. We can get cancer cells from patient blood using our system, and that's absolutely revolutionary in terms of precision medicine, making sure that cancer patients are given drugs which work for them. And that's so important now that the drugs are so expensive, to make sure that they're only prescribed to the patients who can genuinely benefit from them, and make sure that patients don't get unnecessary treatment. So
it's stopping, or it's preventing very invasive surgery, presumably.
Well, the alternative way to get these cancer cells is through a biopsy, and that's okay at the presentation of the patient, but later into their disease, when they've had the original tumour cut out, it's very difficult to access the new metastatic sites, and therefore patients typically don't get up-to-date treatment for their condition at the time. So what we want is a very simple blood test. You put a tube of blood through our machine, and out of that grasp hold of some of the really clinically relevant metastatic cancer cells, and enable them to be analysed in the same way as a normal biopsy.
Now, I said you just reported full-year results. You're pre-revenue, so the numbers themselves aren't necessarily particularly interesting, apart from the cash, which we'll get on to. But this is all about the transition, isn't it, of the company?
Absolutely. So Angle has transformed itself over the last few years and is now a pure-play medical diagnostics business focused on the cancer diagnostics Parsortix system that we have. So we've achieved that during the year, and notably we're using key opinion leaders, which are major cancer centres, to evaluate our product. We increased the number of key opinion leaders from 3 to 9 during the year, and 5 of those have now published their results of evaluations of our system, and in every single case they had fantastic results. They were able to capture cancer cells from patient blood, and those cells were in a form that could be analysed.
Which cancers are we talking about specifically here?
Well, the great thing about our system is it works for all cancer types, and unlike many other systems, and indeed it works for all types of cancer cells within the patient blood. So our cancer centres, the key opinion leaders such as Cancer Research UK Manchester and Bart's Cancer Institute, to name 2 local ones, they're working with a whole range of different cancer types. But during the year we've identified our first clinical application, and that's in ovarian cancer.
How is this working, and how far through the process are you on that then now?
Well, in ovarian cancer, we've picked out a very specific application as our first one, and that is for women who are known to have an abnormal pelvic mass, a growth, and they're having surgery to have that removed. Some of those women have ovarian cancer, but at the moment it's not possible to know which ones, and that's highly dangerous for the women in question, because if you don't know that they've got ovarian cancer before the operation starts, you're not fully prepared with a cancer surgeon expert available to do an operation which might take 6 hours rather than the standard 1 hour, and you need intensive care beds and anaesthetic and all sorts of other support to make sure these women have a good outcome. And at the moment, because they can't be pre-identified, they don't necessarily get that quality of treatment.
So what is the proportion then of women that think they might have it, and those that end up not having it but end up having to have surgery because they were misdiagnosed? Yeah, so
the numbers have been published in the United States. So there are 750,000 women every single year in the United States who have these abnormal growths. The doctors decide to operate on about 200 to 250,000 of those every year, and about 21,000 will have ovarian cancer. So it's roughly around 10 to 11% of the women who have the operation do have ovarian cancer. And as I say, if you don't know in advance, they have a very poor outcome following that operation.
So the idea of this Parsortix diagnostic equipment is to try and isolate all those women that don't ultimately have to have the operation?
Well, they have to have the operation, but they either have a relatively simple operation like a hysterectomy for a benign growth, or they have to have a specialist operation, bearing in mind that they've got ovarian cancer. And the way we've got into this is that one of the key opinion leaders, the Medical University of Vienna, has done a lot of work with our system, and they've discovered that they can use our system with a simple blood test on these women. We capture the ovarian cancer cells from the patient blood, and then they know which RNA markers to look for to discriminate and identify those cells. So the two things together is actually producing a level of sensitivity, i.e. accurately identifying women with ovarian cancer, and a level of specificity, which is accurately identifying the women who are healthy. So you have to do both things. You have to say who's healthy as well as who isn't, at a level much, much higher than traditional techniques. And that's why we're putting a lot of effort into this as our first clinical application.
My understanding as well is also that you're moving into the prostate area. Is that right? Prostate cancer area as well, is that right?
Well, we're very focused on the ovarian clinical application as our first one, and that's where we've got a clinical study. However, as you rightly point out, the key opinion leaders are working on a variety of other cancer areas, and actually locally to us here in the City of London, Bart's Cancer Institute have done some superb work on prostate cancer with our system, and in fact managed to correctly identify prostate cancer cells in patient blood for 100% of 52 patient study that they did. So that shows a great deal of promise for future application in prostate.
Yeah. We've got some clients, IG clients, with some questions which I'd like to put to you if we can. There's 3 in total. The first one is, although all your trial data has so far been excellent, it seems that many more trials are needed long before your Parsortix system can be sold commercially. The question says, how long do you estimate this process could take?
So there's 2 elements to that question. The first thing I'd like to just point out is that there's 2 areas we can make sales. I've so far been talking about clinical sales, and that means in treating patients. And it's necessary to go through, obviously, a number of very robust patient studies and regulatory authorization to do that. But the second area is one that we're currently active in, which is sales for the purposes of research use. So these are research centres or maybe pharmaceutical drug trials who want to use our system as part of those trials and research. That we can make sales into immediately, and following a period of evaluation, as I just mentioned, with the key opinion leaders, we're now actively seeking to make sales for research use. We expect to post some sales by the end of this calendar year if we remain on track with the strategy as it stands. Possibly the questioner was asking specific about the ovarian cancer clinical application. So we've done an enormous amount of work over the last few months with Vienna and internally and with our external experts to plan out the clinical study, so a patient study of actual women who are about to have operations for these abnormal pelvic masses, where we take blood and then we will predict whether they've got ovarian cancer or not. And the beauty of it is that post the operation, so within a week of us doing a blood test, we know the answer. That trial is scheduled, well, it'll be run in parallel in Europe and the United States, and we expect the European end of that to be finished by with good luck, we hope that will be finished by the end of calendar year 2016. So that will open up that market immediately for sales in Europe.
Sales in Europe. Let's talk about the US. Next question is there any news on the FDA approval? I know you've been engaged in the FDA, I think, since March last year, haven't you? How is that all going?
Yeah, well, we've been intensively working with the FDA. Just as a point here, obviously, any medical product needs to have regulatory authorization, has to be approved before it can be used with patients. We've got such approval in Europe already with the CE mark, so we're in good shape for Europe. With regard to the United States, obviously the FDA is a very stringent, robust framework of analysis before they accept anything onto the market. And we made our first submission in March 2014, so we're about 17 months in now with our work with the FDA, and we've been working intensively to address multiple questions that they're raising. The reason they're raising these questions, of course, is that we have the prospect to be the very first company to have a product authorised ever for harvesting cancer cells from patient blood. So, quite understandably, they've got multiple questions.
The last question is about one of the key opinion leaders, actually, MD Anderson. Your collaboration with MD Anderson in Texas was announced with some fanfare in February. How is this going?
Well, MD Anderson is an absolutely superb cancer centre, arguably the best or one of the very best in the entire world. Every company with a medical diagnostic product in the world tries to get into MD Anderson. In our case, they literally pulled us in because they are working so much in this area. The initial work is in colorectal cancer area. I visited them probably about a month ago in Texas, and I was impressed by the work that they're doing. So we're well on track to get some good results in colorectal cancer from MD Anderson. It's worth noting that we've been very blessed actually that Jim Rubin, who's head of translational research at MD Anderson, has now joined Angle as a scientific advisor. And bearing in mind that such individuals have many companies they could work with, we're one of a small number he's chosen. So we're very pleased about that, especially given the fact that he's been involved in circulating tumour cell research for well over 10 years and worked with pretty much all the systems that are available on the market.
One final question I'd like to put to you is actually about the results. Going back to, I said at the top, the one key feature that I find is always interesting in pre-revenue companies is the cash. £8.4 million on your balance sheet. What's your cash burn like? How long is this going to last? What are you intending to do in the future?
Well, historically, our cash burn's been at the £3 to £4 million mark if you look at previous years. We did a fundraising in February and March this year, which was very well supported. It was oversubscribed by the institutional base, and we scaled them back because we wanted our loyal retail shareholder base to have an opportunity to participate in an open offer, and that was also very substantially oversubscribed. So my thanks go to new and existing shareholders for support. That's put us in a strong position because we're now well funded for the next 2 years in order to execute on 3 specific things. One of them is to introduce the product in research use sales and start building commercial revenues, and as I said, that's well on track now. The second one is to complete the patient study, the clinical study I talked about with ovarian cancer, to get that one in the market. And then the third one is to continue to support ongoing work in some of the key opinion leaders in other cancer areas. So we have other potential clinical applications following behind the ovarian one. So we're well funded to do those targeted activities.
You spoke about the shareholders. What's your message to shareholders? Based on the share price chart, in the early part of this chart, it went up from 75 pence up to just shy of £1.05. Explain more about what's going on and what your message is to shareholders.
Well, I think that that increase in share price reflected the very strong results from the 65 patient study that came out of Vienna, clearly demonstrating the sensitivity and specificity of our system, which is unheard of. They were getting as much as 100% sensitivity of identification, and the best they'd previously had was 24.5%. So only 1 in 4 patients could be identified with other systems, whereas ours is virtually all of them. So that gives us a great opportunity. But the bigger picture is we've only just started. We're trying to build a major UK business in this field. It's a revolutionising field. Liquid biopsies are going to become the norm. We think we've got a technique which is better than anything else on the market to get hold of these cells, and that will make a tremendous difference in giving personalised medical care to cancer patients in the future.
OK, well, we look forward to hearing more about this. But in the meantime, Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.
That's Andrew Newland. He is the Chief Executive of Angle plc.